FPS, guys.
Who's that, a K-pop star?
The new supreme leader of North Korea.
No shit. I mean, that dude looks younger than I am.
You guys heard that?
Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so if you are a first-person shooter fan, someone who loves looking down a barrel, feeling that adrenaline rush as enemies come at you, and experiencing new worlds through your own eyes, then today's video was made specifically for you. Let's go. Kicking things off, the Defiant, and this is one of the most historically interesting FPS games ever announced. The Defiant is a bold new first-person shooter set against the rarely explored backdrop of the Second Sino-Japanese War in China between the 1930s and 1940s, where players traverse shadowy streets and war-torn villages accompanied by a loyal companion who adds emotional depth to the journey. In the Defiant, you step onto a land soaked with the warm blood of war, exploring huge snowy forests, guarded roads, and dangerous villages behind enemy lines, using many different guns, including classic weapons like the Hanyang rifle, the Mauser military pistol, and the MP-18 submachine gun. The developer wants to be as historically accurate as possible, saying every plant and every brick silently recounts the undeniable historical facts, and the weaponry is all inspired by firearms used in the real conflict. The Second Sino-Japanese War is one of the largest and least represented conflicts in gaming, making the Defiant one of the most unique FPS settings in years. Rules of engagement, the gray state, and this tactical FPS is building quiet but serious buzz in the indie community. It's a tactical military FPS built around the concept of morally complex combat situations, where every engagement puts you in a real operational scenario with rules of engagement that you must follow, and violating those rules has genuine consequences for how your mission unfolds. The gray state setting refers to the ambiguous moral landscape of modern warfare, and where the line between combatant and civilian, between legal action and war crime is never clear-cut, and the game forces you to navigate those gray zones in real time under extreme pressure. The gameplay emphasizes authenticity over arcade action, realistic weapon handling, squad communication, situational awareness, designed for players who want their military FPS to feel genuinely serious and grounded. The indie development team is building something that sits closer to Arma or Rainbow Six in tone, a serious, thoughtful military experience, rather than the bombastic action of mainstream shooters. Metro 2039 and the most acclaimed post-apocalyptic FPS franchise is making its most ambitious return yet.
In these tunnels, they call him Führer. But that is not your name. Your name is Hunter.
Metro 2039 is the next landmark FPS from acclaimed storytellers 4A Games' journey into the dark heart of post-apocalyptic Moscow in a harrowing conflict for the very soul of the Metro. The year is 2039, and for a quarter century, the last survivors of nuclear war have been locked in bitter conflict deep in the Metro tunnels beneath the Poison City. Metro 2039 has players return to Moscow's metro tunnels not as series protagonist Artyom, but rather as a brand new reclusive character known only as the Stranger, haunted by violent waking nightmares, who is forced to face the ghosts of his past and return to the tunnels now under the tyrannical rule of the Novorreich regime. From a gameplay perspective, Metro 2039 sticks to the series' core while introducing updated systems, weaving exploration, survival, combat, and stealth across a hauntingly beautiful but deadly world of underground tunnels and poisoned surface landscapes. The Novorreich regime, a fanatical faction controlling the Metro through propaganda and fear, creates a deeply political and chilling backdrop that feels more relevant than ever. Gallipoli, and if you want a WW1 FPS that takes the conflict completely seriously, this is the one. The game is set during the legendary Gallipoli campaign of 1915, one of the most devastating and iconic battles of the entire First World War, where Allied forces from Australia, New Zealand, Britain, and France attempted a massive amphibious assault on the Ottoman-held Gallipoli Peninsula in what became a brutal 8-month military disaster. The FPS gameplay puts you inside those hellish trenches and landing beaches, fighting through conditions that historically claimed over 500,000 casualties, bringing the raw human cost of one of history's most studied military campaigns to life in first person. The developers are clearly aiming for historical authenticity, depicting the weapons, tactics, and environments of WW1 trench warfare with accuracy, from bolt-action rifles and artillery barrages to the desperate hand-to-hand fighting in the narrow trenches. The Gallipoli campaign carries enormous cultural weight, particularly for Australia and New Zealand, where Anzac Day is one of the most sacred national commemorations, making this FPS a genuinely meaningful historical project. And this might be the most disturbing and viscerally intense FPS horror game ever announced. Ill is a first-person horror shooter built around the concept of a catastrophic biological infection. You fight through environments packed with grotesquely mutated creatures that were once human, and the level of graphic biological horror on display in every piece of footage shown has made it one of the most talked about indie announcements in years. The creatures are built with extraordinary practical horror detail. Every enemy looks like a nightmare of twisted flesh, bone, and organic mutation, pushing the boundaries of what horror game design has attempted and creating a genuinely disturbing visual experience that stays with you. The gameplay blends first-person combat with survival horror resource management. Ammo is scarce, enemies are terrifying, and the environments are claustrophobic and oppressive in a way that maximizes tension throughout every encounter. The development team. Team Clout has spent years crafting the game's signature horror aesthetic, and the patience and care going into every creature design shows a team deeply committed to creating something genuinely unique.
Take it fast, guys.
Who's that, a K-pop star?
The new supreme leader of North Korea.
No shit. I mean, that dude looks younger than I am.
You guys heard that?
Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 4, and the biggest FPS franchise in the world is back with its most anticipated entry in years. Developed by Infinity Ward, The studio behind the original Modern Warfare trilogy, MW4, is the 23rd installment in the Call of Duty series and features major gameplay changes, including the removal of hipfire bloom and significant updates to the movement system, including the brand new ability to hang and shimmy along edges and pipes. Fan favorites Ghost, Soap, and Price return as Task Force 141 faces a massive new global threat, and the campaign promises to be the most cinematic and intensely produced Modern Warfare story since the legendary 2009 original that defined a generation of FPS gaming. Development is led by Infinity Ward with assistance from 10 additional Activision studios, including Treyarch, bringing the full power and resources of the entire Call of Duty operation to create the most polished and ambitious entry ever. The multiplayer brings refined mechanics, new maps, and the improved movement system to competitive play, making gunfights feel faster, more fluid, and more satisfying than any previous Modern Warfare entry. Hell Let Loose Vietnam, and the most authentic large-scale tactical FPS ever made, is heading to a brand new war. Hell Let Loose Vietnam is an upcoming multiplayer tactical first-person shooter set in the Vietnam War, developed by Expression Games and built on Unreal Engine 5. With Team 17 emphasizing the development will not be detrimental to the original Hell Let Loose, as an entirely new development team has been established. While Hell Let Loose was steeped in the muddy trenches and fields of World War II, Vietnam takes players through the dense jungles and sprawling villages along the river-heavy landscape of Vietnam, described by developers as a hardcore, immersive theater of war with ambush-heavy environments and tactical considerations designed to reflect the Vietnam War era from 1965 to 1973. If you've played titles like Line of Sight, Vietnam, or Rising Storm 2, Vietnam, this is shaping up to be a modern take with the same large-scale authenticity that Hell Let Loose is known for, now with 100-player battles in Unreal Engine 5. The developers chose the Vietnam War as their theme because it hadn't been featured in any major game title for many years, making this a genuinely long overdue return to one of gaming's most iconic conflict settings. Claude, and this indie FPS is building a dedicated following with its genuinely unique creature horror concept. It's a first-person horror survival shooter where you face off against a terrifying breed of creature enemies, and the core gameplay loop is built around using your environment, limited weapons, and smart tactical thinking to survive increasingly overwhelming encounters. The art style leans into practical creature horror. Every enemy is designed to feel genuinely wrong and unsettling, and the gameplay demands that you learn enemy behavior patterns rather than simply blasting through encounters with raw firepower. The indie team behind Claude has clearly been inspired by classic creature feature horror films, and the game channels that energy into a first-person experience that keeps tension high from the very first encounter. Claude is primarily being developed for PC, with console versions potentially following, and its Steam page has attracted significant wishlist numbers from horror FPS fans. Twisted Tower. And this vertical FPS concept is one of the most creative indie shooter ideas in years. It's a first-person shooter built entirely around ascending a massive, twisted, supernatural tower, each floor bringing completely new enemies, traps, environmental hazards, and gameplay mechanics that keep the experience constantly surprising from the ground floor to the deadly summit. The roguelite structure means each attempt at climbing the tower generates a different layout, different weapons, different enemy configurations, and different challenges, creating a shooter that rewards persistence and adaptability rather than memorization. The tower itself is filled with supernatural and surreal elements. Reality bends and twists as you climb higher, making the visual design increasingly abstract and disturbing the further you ascend. The fast-paced FPS combat rewards creative use of the environment, pushing enemies off platforms, using the tower's traps against their creators, and finding explosive combinations between the weapons you discover on each floor. Fire State. And this is the most visually striking and stylistically unique FPS on this entire list. It's a fast-paced first-person shooter with a striking visual identity built around fire, destruction, and high-octane urban combat, where you fight through environments that are constantly changing as explosions, fire spread, and structural damage reshape every battlefield in real time. The dynamic fire and destruction system is the game's signature feature. Every surface can burn, every structure can collapse, and the tactical landscape of each fight evolves constantly as the environment responds to combat, creating firefights that feel genuinely dynamic and unpredictable. The art style pushes a vivid, almost painterly aesthetic. Fire effects are rendered with extraordinary visual fidelity, creating a game that looks as spectacular as it plays. Fire State is being developed for PC with a focus on creating the most visually impressive fire simulation ever put into a first-person shooter. Last Harbor, and this survival FPS concept is one of the darkest and most desperate on this entire list. It's set in a world where civilization has completely collapsed. The Last Harbor is literally the final functioning safe zone on Earth, and you play as one of its defenders, fighting off increasingly desperate waves of enemies who will do anything to break through your defenses and take what little remains. The game blends first-person shooting with base defense mechanics. You gather resources, fortify your harbor, set traps and defensive positions, and then fight off the incoming threats in intense FPS combat, creating a loop that keeps every session feeling urgent and meaningful. The tone is deliberately bleak and heavy. This is not an upbeat survival game. The weight of protecting the last place on Earth drives every decision and makes every successful defense feel genuinely hard-earned. The enemies range from desperate human survivors to more dangerous organized factions who have decided that taking the harbor by force is their only option for survival. Iron Sand, and this desert set FPS is building interest with its unique environmental concept and visual style. It's a first-person shooter set in a vast, unforgiving desert environment where the terrain itself is as deadly as the enemies, with sandstorms that reduce visibility to zero, scorching heat that drains stamina, and constantly shifting sand dunes that change the landscape between encounters. The game uses a unique sand physics system. Bullets travel differently through sand clouds. Explosions create craters that become tactical cover, and enemies use the shifting terrain to ambush from unexpected directions, making every encounter genuinely dynamic. The visual aesthetic is striking and distinct, all bleached yellows, burning oranges, and deep shadow, creating a world that feels harsh, beautiful, and completely hostile to human life simultaneously. The weapons feel appropriately weighted and sand-worn. Nothing is pristine in this world, and the maintenance system requires you to clean and maintain your gear as sand clogs mechanisms and reduces effectiveness over time. Active Matter, and this physics-focused FPS is doing something genuinely different with the genre. It's a first-person shooter built entirely around advanced physics simulation. Every object in every environment interacts with real physics, meaning you can use the environment creatively in ways that most shooters never allow, from toppling structures onto enemies to redirecting projectiles using moving objects. The active matter system gives every surface, object, and enemy a physical weight and behavior, creating combat that feels genuinely reactive and sandbox-like, where your creativity in using the environment is rewarded as much as your raw shooting skill. The game has been described by its developers as a physics playground disguised as an FPS, and the combination of creative environmental interaction with precise gunplay creates a uniquely satisfying moment-to-moment experience. And closing out the list with pure fun, guns and goblins, because not every FPS needs to be serious. It's a fantasy first-person shooter where you play as a gunslinger dropped into a world overrun by goblins, and the core premise is exactly as fun as it sounds, blasting through enormous hordes of colorful, chaotic goblin enemies with an increasingly ridiculous arsenal of guns that absolutely do not belong in a fantasy world. The humor is baked into every element. Goblins tumble, fly, and react with exaggerated cartoon physics, and the weapons range from period-appropriate flintlocks to completely anachronistic modern guns that the game embraces with total commitment to the joke. The gameplay is fast and frantic, waves of goblins come at you from every direction, and surviving requires both sharpshooting and smart use of environmental traps, explosive barrels, and the goblins' own tendency to accidentally hurt each other in the chaos.